Welcome guys. So this is going to be a tutorial on UDP sockets, and I'll be giving you a basic intro about what UDP sockets are, and after that we'll write a client server based program from scratch. Hope you guys enjoy the video. So what are UDP sockets? Before we get into UDP sockets, it's important to understand what a socket is. A socket is an endpoint for communication between machines. So basically the way you want to think about it is like it's like the most smallest basic units that connects machines together, and we are basically able to send messages across local area network, Wi-Fi, and basically that's all you need to understand. Sockets can use both TCP and UDP. So what do they actually mean? TCP is Transmission Control Protocol. So this is one protocol that you use when you want reliable network, reliable connections, but it has a drawback. It's slower because it waits for an acknowledgement and the data loss is very less. But when we talk about UDP, we're talking about like transmissions which are really quick, like sending of data that's really quick and there's no error checking. So it's really fast, but yes, it's less reliable. Oftentimes you don't know like where the bits are going to go. Moving on to a client server example, we'll be writing a client server based example for UDP from scratch, and the idea is to write a server and a client. So basically client is going to have a message and server is going to listen to that message, and it's going to add another message and send it back to the client. It'll be more clear as I do the example. So this is my server.py. I'll do this in Python. Yeah. First thing that you want to do is import Python, import sockets. That's like a library that you need to create a socket. So because this is a socket on the server side, we'll call it server socket, and socket dot socket dot socket socket dot af dot inet dot sock. So what you guys want to understand is like socket.af.inet, that basically describes like the address family that the socket can handle, like the IP addresses. And sock underscore dgram is basically that's like the syntax for specifying a UDP program. If that happens, if we are able to create a server socket, we'll print from the server socket created. Now we need a host. That's going to be our local host. Local host basically is the IP address of the machine that you are currently using. Coming onto the port, we can choose any port at random. I would choose 5432. Now we need to bind our service socket that we created, and what the Python bind function accepts is a tuple with the host and the port. If we are able to do this, I'm going to print again the server socket connected to the host. Now we want to add a funny message. This is the message, this is like a string that's going to be added to the request sent by the client. Basically, the client is going to send us a message, and we're going to add any message. We're going to append the message and send it back to the client, and client's going to display it. This is going to be a fairly simple example, perfect for beginners. This is a funny message. Writing a true loop while one data attr equals server socket dot receive from, and we need a buffer size for this. Typically you can choose whatever, like 1024 bytes. Let's accept 4096 bytes. So basically it's going to receive from the client, it's going to receive a request from the client. The data is going to be the data that client sends, and the address is going to be like the IP of the client. If we get a data, if we get a request, then we're going to print server sending the funny message. Like if we get data, we're going to send it back with a print statement from the server side saying we're sending it. So what we need to do to send it is server socket dot send to function. Now this function is going to get the data from the client because that's what we are appending with. Now the funny message that we just wrote here dot encode and the address, the IP that we just received. So basically now we use the method called encode because across the server we can't straight up send strings, so we need to encode it in UTF. That's why we used encode. We're going to save that. Coming on to the client side, it's going to be pretty much rinse and repeat. Import socket. I'm just gonna copy this right here, and rather than we won't name it server socket, we name it client socket. It wouldn't matter, we're doing this so that there's a clarity, like we know what's happening and where it's happening. Same, we'll say host is going to be localhost, the local IP of the machine. It's usually 127.0.0.1 most of the time, yeah. Port equals 5433, and the data that we'll send to the server, let's call it message, and let's call it hello. Now a try block, try will print the message client, and we'll just client socket dot send to, we're going to send this message to the server, send to message dot encode, and we'll send it to the address, which is going to be a tuple with host and the port of the host, that's 5432. Again, for the client port, I chose a random port like 5433 just to make it random. Data and server, the address of the server basically, and the data sent by the server. Client socket dot receive from Again, the buffer size, you can choose whatever. I'm sticking with 4096. You can pick 2 to the power 10 bytes, whatever. Now the data that we'll receive from the server, the appended string with the funny message, we need to now decode that because it's encoded. We want to print a string, right? Encode. No, my bad. Decode. And if we get the decoded message, we're going to print client we're doing this just to make sure like where we're getting the exact data from. And finally, if we are able, if we get the data, or if we don't get the data, we need to close our client socket. Print client closing socket and close. Save that. Now let's run this. Python 3 server dot py. It's a socket created, connected to localhost. Now Python 3 dot py. Sending the funny message. We closed the socket, we appended the string, we got the perfect message. So guys, this was a very short but a relevant UDP protocol example. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you liked the video, make sure you like the video and comment any problems or